Okay, we're live. Good evening. How are y'all ladies doing this today?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing pretty good. I really appreciate you all being here to have this very timely discussion about mental health and intersection of mental health and education. And before we get started, I always like to give my disclaimer that this conversation we're going to have tonight is for informational, educational purposes only. We're not giving any individual medical, mental health advice, any specific recommendations as far as education goes. And our views that we're going to express are our personal views. They do not reflect the views of any of our employers. So just to get that out the way. So why don't we start with introductions and, please include in your introduction, the type of work that you do. So we'll all have a sense of the framework.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
you
Go
gonna go
ahead,
first?
Jen.
Okay. I'm Jennifer Thomas and I live in Arkansas. I have taught for 20 years now. And in that time, I've served as different things like a literacy coach. I've been an AP coordinator, GT facilitator, and second grade teacher even. So I've had experience K through 12. And now I have started a new virtual learning platform called Growth Achieved. And you can find information about Growth Achieved on growthachieved.org. And basically, if you need help with tutoring or if you need a project manager for a summer program, I'm the person that you come to. And I'm just excited about tonight and about giving you information from experience dealing with mental health and education.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for that interview. And it's hard for me to believe that you have been teaching that long, but the numbers add up. So makes sense. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And hello, everyone. I'm Faith Brantley. I live and work in Houston, Texas. I have been in education. This is my 16th year, 17th year. We start to lose count after a little while. Maybe once I get to that 20-year mark, it'll be easier to remember what year it is. And I have taught. I started out doing after-school programming and adult education in the after-school program. I also have taught 6th grade through 12th grade, different grade levels in primarily English language arts and in theater, like performance theater. But in the last probably, I would say 8 years, primarily been teaching and guiding both other teachers and students in learning about social issues and advocacy work. So that's primarily like my main area, my main lane. I also work as a curriculum writer, both for the district and contract work for writing curriculum units and programming that centers around diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes, yeah. So we have really like decades of experience here from the educator standpoint, and so I'm just really excited and really happy to hear from you ladies tonight because we know that COVID totally upended the education system. Undergraduate, college, and grade school as well. So I know it's been just an incredible adjustment. I mean, I think from the outside looking in, as a person who doesn't have school-age children, it has been amazing, I think, to see the changes and adjustments that people made, like all of a sudden, to have their kids in school and everything. So I wonder if we could start by you just giving us a description of your work during this last year of COVID, how what your work has been like, how much it's changed, how you've had to adjust with COVID.
Well, I know that for me, working in a environment where I'm supporting teachers and students with curriculum writing. I teach my own class or taught my own class even during COVID, and I'm responsible for providing resources to teachers across our district. So what that looks like after the closures began about a year ago was that there were a lot of questions. Like nobody knew how we were going to handle it. We were waiting on information from state legislation around and our state education agency around like what school and attendance and in-person versus remote and all of that could even look like during the time when, like in the summer is when I primarily work on preparing for the next year, but our summer was full of uncertainty. And so it involved making multiple plans of action. If this is the situation, then here's what we are assuming our plan is going to be. If that's not the situation, here's plan B. We had to have a plan A through like E. And then once school actually started in August, though even those plans, whatever plans we had come up with, had to undergo constant adjustment. So this past year has been definitely one of having to exercise like a lot of flexibility, extending grace and patience, not just with like school administrators, with other teachers, with parents and families, and the like hyper politicized choice of whether or not to send your child back into school. And then, I have a school aged child, I have a kindergartner at home, or I had a kindergartner at home at the time, and we had to make those decisions given whatever information that we had available, like what is going to be the best option for our own child. So it involved a lot of juggling. I kept my kindergartner in virtual school up until just maybe a month ago. So it involved like long hours of trying to juggle full-time work and monitoring and supporting a child doing remote learning like at the same time. And that really changed very much what what my job looked like. I also felt a lot of pressure too, though, because it felt like more people were relying on me to provide, support resources. There were deadlines that were coming up, and having to adjust like work schedule to working from home while handling teaching your own child at home at the same time. There were a lot of like iterations of schedules and attempts to like juggle those things, and that's just kind of what it looked like, not just for me, but for like so many other people in my organization and other people who work in the field. So yeah, that's what it's been like for the last year.
Yeah, definitely following just talking to you, but also following on social media. I know it's like a roller coaster. So it definitely sounds like that's how it's been.
I share similar experiences as Faith just mentioned. When we first decided that, okay, we're not going back to school in March, it was okay, we'll go with our backup plan that we had for the school year, as far as for work to give to students. And then some schools even tried to make little packets and paper packets if the parents didn't have technology. And then, a lot came up with, well, why don't they have certain technology, or why is the Wi-Fi not working in that area of town? And, it just highlighted so many inequities that, we can't ignore. And everything was just brought to the forefront of the haves and the have-nots, and I think that was across the board. As far as for my duties, I felt like my work schedules changed because we had to prepare so many different plans, as Faith mentioned, the A, B, and the C and the D plans. You had to wait for the higher ups to tell you, go this way or that way. I worked sometime at 2 a.m. because I was waiting on one group to finish writing curriculum or inserting curriculum. And then I actually, because I am a parent, I fall into that category of kind of wanting to help parents more. And I volunteered to create like snapshots of what the child needed to do for that week for K-5. So it was like, okay, you finish writing it, but then I have to wait till you finish writing it and then wake up and make sure at 2 a.m. I got that turned in so it could be ready by 8 a.m. for teachers. So that changed me a lot. I was like, but I can do it. I realized that I had a lot more in me than what I ever could imagine. I tell teachers, I also mentor teachers. I tell them now, they say, oh, it's just, I don't know if I want to work during the summer. I don't know if teachers for me. I said, if you can make it through this, you can be an okay teacher. Don't worry about it,
So you good if you can teach through this.
So I mean, that actually ended up being encouragement. They were like, well, she's right. If I can manage it during this, but I mean, I think scheduling is a big thing. I think people realize that organization took a part in a lot of things. And then a lot of empathy. You hear a lot about being mindfulness and being mindful of things and having empathy toward people. I think people start realizing that a lot more. Maybe this person can't turn that work in 2 hours. Maybe this person don't have that in their house. A teacher may not have that in their house. My internet may not be the best because I get a whatever salary, So, I mean, I think people need to really just check all of that and really see that, hey, we still made it. We had a lot of hurdles, but there's a lot of things we need to look at for the future, so that we can be better prepared for emergencies, so that we can see why different things happen the way they happen. So,
let me ask y'all. So before, I consider myself to be fairly reasonable with technology, but when we instantly had to shift to different telemedicine platforms and learn how to do, use the system differently, I found out like it doesn't come as quick because there were so many, we're using Zoom for this, we're using Microsoft Teams for this. And even though they're all generally similar, they're not exactly the same. And sometimes you have to give maybe like a presentation or something like that on all these different platforms. So in your school systems, did you get any extra help with technology, or was it an expectation? Did you kind of just have to pick it up as you went and kind of make it work?
In my experience with my organization, there was some support available, but everybody was learning how to fly the plane while they were in it.
Mm-hmm.
And in my role, I had to teach myself how to use different types of platforms. I had to very quickly learn how to be a graphic designer and an instructional designer for remote learning, not just creating student-facing resources, which is primarily, what I do, but providing all of the guidelines, one-pagers, instructional videos for other people, other teachers or other instructors to know how to use the resources that I had created. The situation changes quite a bit if you are, let's say I'm writing a worksheet or a test or things like that I was creating before, or a project. I could provide guidelines for teachers about how they might use that and how they might add spice to it and be creative in the classroom. But essentially, teachers know how to teach material if you give it to them. The game changes when you put all of those things on various digital platforms. Now you have to teach people how to use the platforms to share or to educate kids with. And that required, similar to Jennifer, I'd be online watching YouTube videos about Flipgrid, watching YouTube videos about how to use these different programs in Nearpod, and how do I embed an outside video into my PowerPoint and record over it and make sure I get the sound and make sure all the transitions are correct and have that ready for somebody else to use.
I was just going to say, I need to know that right now. So maybe in the future, you can tell me how to embed that video in that PowerPoint.
As soon as I get me a couple of vacation days, then no problem. No problem.
What about you, Jen? Did y'all get any, I guess, help with technology or assistance, or were you just really kind of having to figure it out on your own?
Well, yes, we did. So we have a technology department, very well-versed technology department in the district I work in. So, I mean, they kicked in action, but then you also had teachers that had already been exposed to certain platforms that maybe it was more low key initially, and then it became the big thing later on. Same thing she said about Nearpod, Flipgrid. I just got through using Flipgrid this morning with another group that I work with. So definitely those are ways that we communicate to other people. We started making like videos to communicate a lot of times, specialized newsletters, or it was kind of difficult when you're shifting. Like I know a lot of people decided to shift to different learning platforms, and a lot of parents had to learn new things. So we had to kind of think on the terms of, okay, as a parent, how much time would I need to learn this, you know? So, I mean, really just trying to make sure that they knew at least the basics and had access. And then all at the beginning of the year, I was a part of a group that helped train students on the platform so that before they even got like their first assignment. So we did offer that. Now, I can't say everything works perfect because technology always is going to have glitches. So it may be down one day and you just have to rest in that and say, okay, it's down today. So what's the next plan? Or am I going to have a next plan? Or how can I make up for that learning loss? You know, so definitely. But they did have people in place. People stepped out and learned new things like what Faith just said. And I mean, I remember going to some trainings from our State Department. So, I mean, they tried to do that. But it's just that shift in, okay, now I just introduced all these new things. Even now with us being still with virtual and in person, that virtual student is still trying to get adjusted. Or if you introduce something new, that's going to change the tables again. Do they know how to access it? Is it easy to access? Do you need a special download? Do you need a special app? Do you need, you know, I think everybody has learned a lot more about terms, how to record things. I learned about Screencastify, but guess who I learned it from? My fifth grader. My fifth grader can make a presentation probably just as good or better than me now. So, I mean, hey.
Yeah, I think they seem that, I think kids, you know, just with technology, they kind of, I think, adjust to it, you know, quicker sometimes than we can. But I just cannot imagine the amount of work. I mean, I think about the work change that I had. It just is nothing compared to the amount of work that it took in this transition. So just even before we go on, kudos to y'all, because learning all those platforms, teaching not just the kids, but the parents, and then, you know, while you're actually trying to work, right? All that is like besides the work that you're actually trying to do. So, you know, kudos to y'all for that. Cause that is, we are going to look back, I think, on this moment and be like, I think a lot of things, but also just like, it was amazing the shift that people were able to do to try to keep things, you know, going. What would y'all say observations or changes that you've noticed in the students? So as the year has progressed, you know, we're at a different time point. I think we were kind of in a state of shock last year this time. Now people are tired. You know, it's gone on long enough. You know, we're fatigued. We're tired of being at home. Like kind of over this, as this time period has continued, what changes have y'all noticed, like student-wise?
Well, I noticed that quieter sometimes. Like if a child has been virtual and then come back, they won't talk as much. I think we're more into our social media or even technology altogether more. You're buried your head into the phone, you know, instead of talking. And I just noticed that to start those conversations up sometimes takes a little bit more when they're given opportunity. I also noticed some withdrawal just even in the household, you know, like about wanting to go out. You know, if you have a virtual child that's been in all day, they started to just kind of retreat there and say, I'm good here. And a lot of parents that I talked to were like, my child has always been an active child. My child loves basketball. Why did they just want to sit and just watch movies or play their video game? And I think that was kind of like the effect it had on them. They just kind of they kind of just retreated within themselves, I noticed a little bit. And even my personal children, when I took them out to the park, when we started to get a little more comfortable, and it's like, well, it'll be okay. We just don't need to be around people like face to face. It had been a while. We stayed in for a while, but they stopped and looked at their bikes like, I can't be by that person, you know? So I was like, oh no, creating, I don't know, some new monster or something with this. But I do know it has been difficult, and they want to make. I also know that the students that are in the schools, I'm hearing that it's the same that way, that they're like, well, at least if when they first started school, oh no, I can't talk to this person. I feel sad that I can't interact with them the way we used to. We used to be in really small groups working as a team, on hands-on projects. Now hands-on things were kind of taken out more because you have to sanitize more. Was funny. I walked into a classroom and I was trying to assist a teacher, and I was like, well, you take the notes. And she was like, there's no paper. I said, there's no paper. You're right. I don't know why I went straight to before COVID, because you tried to decrease all ways of transferring anything. So it was take notes on your computer, so just to continue to stick with what you asked, getting off subject, but it just was a big thing of just retreating to themselves. I guess it still is on subject because the group work was not there anymore. You would do a group work, let's say on a Google Doc, and everybody add to it, versus I'm going to add to this poster and make this neat thing, and we're going to create and mold and build,
And I was thinking about the way that people learn, because people learn in different ways. I know for me, sometimes putting that pen on paper is a way that I process information differently. Just like to me, sometimes I'll actually want to read the book itself, like the hard copy versus reading on a screen. So it sounds like even just not being able to like have paper and do things that way kind of takes away an avenue that maybe that person learns better that way, like when they write their notes or whatever. It's like not an option. I didn't realize that. So all of their assignments have to be turned in electronically.
That is what we stick to. Yes. Even my child with biology, I was like, hold on. I remember some in-depth labs in biology, and she was like, well, we watched one on video. I'm like, no, that is not the right experience.
No, the scientist in me is like, my heart is breaking for that. Is crying for that. Yeah, that's sad. Okay.
I was like, can I go purchase this stuff? Do I need to just go to the store and buy something and say, okay, we're going to experience? I remember a little bit, but it was hard that way.
And Faith, what would you say, like observations you notice with the children as the pandemic has gone on?
I've gotten a chance to see it in a couple of different avenues because I have like I mentioned before, I have a kindergartner. It's her first year. Well, she'd been in like Montessori preschool, so she'd been in school since 3. But this was going to be like, okay, you're going to kindergarten now, and so the experience with hers is one thing with like younger children. Then I have an older daughter who, for her, this is her first year in college. So I have one going to kindergarten, one going to college in the middle of the pandemic. The oldest one, more of an introvert and more adept with doing things online. Her whole high school experience had been one-to-one technology from 9th through 12th grade. She went to a school that was a project-based high school. So they did a lot of group things, but because the school was designed around the idea of collaborating digitally, but they were still like they still had labs and things like that in person. They built things in actual engineering labs. It was a STEM school. But she adapted more easily to being separated, I guess, from as many people than the youngest one did, who my kindergartner is an extrovert. And like you all were mentioning about how people learn differently, there are people like they're emotionally interpersonally different. Like there's variety in that. So we've got folks who are maybe more on the introverted side, and they don't necessarily need as much social interaction to feel rejuvenated and to thrive. And then there are those who thrive off of social interaction. And I could see how that had such an impact on my kindergartner one, who's like and doesn't know a person who isn't a friend. Like she makes friends at the grocery store, at the AT&T store line, like everywhere. To be suddenly taken into a situation where like you can't hug people anymore. You can't do like all of preschool, and the early education is a lot of social learning, like learning how to be with other people, like learning how to be a person in society is pretty much what early education is about. And to try to shift that into a virtual situation is difficult. Like one small example is having had to, like for her virtual school, had to get her a touchscreen laptop. I mean, the school, she's transferred schools and went to one that provided a computer, but we'd already bought one at that point because she was 5 at the time and she can't read. So how's she gonna type? Like,
Yes, right.
so, I needed her to be able to like draw her letters on the screen. She would do her assignments, and we hold them up and take a picture and submit it on Class Dojo, like all these different things, learning how to use all these different apps. But still, it took a lot of, and still takes a lot of conscious effort on our part as parents to try to engage with her as much as we could. Now that we can do a little bit more, it's helped, but it's hard on children. Now they are able to adjust and adapt to the rules a lot faster than a lot of adults. I mean, there were plenty of times that we would, if we happened to be out somewhere, my kindergarten would be like, "Why? They don't have their mask on. You're supposed to stay. This person is too close. They're too close. They're supposed to be 6 feet." I was like, "How do you know what 6 feet are? You
She
haven't even learned
it's not
measurement."
right here. She know it's not right
Yeah.
here. That's what she know.
So they are, as while they are adaptable, like we still have responsibilities as adults, to try to support them in socializing as much as possible, and not let them kind of sink into too much screen time, too much like a digital world. Now I admit that was a super challenge in the early months, because I was spending hours in front of the computer working, and now I'm at home with a child 24/8. Like we're never apart. And sometimes I'd say you have to go in there and watch Odd Squad or something, just watch TV so I can finish doing this. And it was a challenge for her, for students definitely as well. So that's why I'm really glad that we're engaging in this conversation in way to talk about some of the ways that parents, educators, and other advocates for young people can help support them in their mental health and emotional health, like during this time.
Most definitely. And we're going to shift into that conversation more about that intersection with mental health and education. At your where you work in your districts, what type of mental health resources are available for the children? If like just with COVID, I guess maybe it was different before COVID, or I'm not sure. Maybe it's the same. But what kind of mental health resources are available in the school system?
Well, counselors at your schools, and I always tell people, please seek your counselors. They're here for you. They're waiting for you, and they actually would do some checks, anyway, just because that's their job. They would kind of call or try to do something like that, or maybe Zoom with a child. We also have some outsourced type resources that would come in, and that they were working there beforehand as well. Since then, I know that we've had a lot of social and emotional training before training, and then also there's videos and things put out by our state department that covers how to feel a certain way, or how to even have good etiquette digitally, because that was an issue. If you can't be face to face with your boo, what are you going to do online? So you have to make sure that you teach teenagers and be appropriate and all of that. I think that people realize that part too, So I did attend different trainings on that, but that social and emotional wellness became an in-service that was offered each quarter. It also was a filter into maybe like your lesson plan, like, well, how are you going to mention this or meet their needs this way? And I mean, I'm sure that some schools may have tried to go further than others. It just depends. But I do know that they did try to address it.
What about you, Faye?
In my district, as with probably many other states, district I work with a public charter school, and we have student support counselors and college counselors. So there are different ones, like the school counselors have a lot of training and resources available to helping students with anxiety, with depression, with some of the interpersonal or family dynamic issues that they might be facing, with students having to spend more time at home. There was like an increase in um, reports of like tension with family, where before school, especially for high school students, provides for many not just like a place where they can socialize with other people and have their own um, like chosen family, but that's where they might be involved in groups, because we had like meeting groups, affinity groups for students to like meet up with a counselor or with a sponsor teacher to help support them. And that was what we had like in person during the school year. So those sort of things had to shift into a digital format. And so what would happen is, we would have counselors who would set up calls, video calls, to chat with students, ask them, how they're doing, and make sure that they are continuing to, if they were receiving services before, if they were like going to counseling or therapy outside of school before, that they were able to connect to do that virtually
Okay.
during the closures and during that time. But I mean, that those things were still rocky. All of our various like organizations and um, resources were affected by the pandemic and the closures as well. Um, I found students might have found it more difficult to get appointment to speak with their counselor or with their therapist outside of school, just because the demand had gotten so high.
Oh, yes.
My counselor therapist that I see became so busy that I had to reduce, the number of times that I could check in with her in the month, just because her schedule was so packed.
That's a good
But yeah,
point. Just the
yeah,
access.
access got limited.
I'm curious now. Tell me, the affinity group. I'm just curious to know more about that. You say it's kind of like a support group. That was like a pre-existing COVID thing y'all had.
Yeah, on a campus-based level, there were part of our organization has a culture team at the like district level that supports campuses in determining or finding out what interest groups or what demographic groups, I guess, affinity groups is what they're called, might want to get together to talk about the particular issues that might cause stress for them. So an example might be the let's say the LGBTQ support and allies group. So they'll have the district level can support a campus person, sometimes a teacher, sometimes a counselor, and hosting and providing them like some resources or talking points for hosting a group, a circle for students to come to, and they meet like once a week or once every other week. So we had those sort of things going on, and then the student support counselors would identify on their various campuses um, students who might need additional support in like interacting with others or anger management, those kinds of things. And so there are those kinds of groups that existed during um, in the before times. But a lot of
That's
that had to
nice.
shift. Yeah. Now, getting students to participate and getting parents and families to know about these resources can still be and was then a challenge. While clubs and talking circles and affinity groups and counseling support services exist on campus, and I'm fortunate to work with an organization that does try to prioritize that. There's still a lot of um, like negative feelings that people might have about seeking those types of support, particularly in the communities that I'm working with. The organization with which I work serves predominantly Latino and Black students, minority students. And within the cultures, there are sometimes a like I don't know, negative feelings about and distrust about the idea of getting support or therapy or counseling services. Yeah, there's some stigma around it that has to be like undone in order to make those things available to the kids. The positive is students, I guess this younger generation Z, I guess it is, they're a little bit more open to that. We can thank the millennials for making going to therapy sexy so that so the younger folks are not as resistant to it as maybe their parents might be.
I was going to say, I think it sounds like one of the barriers is, you know, if you have to approach a parent and say, hey, I think your child would be good for anger management group or, you know, other interpersonal thing, it could be viewed as a reflection, right, of my parenting or something here, as opposed to like a supplement, right? This is like something we've noticed and we're trying to be of help. So definitely that stigma, in, you know, like you said, notably in Black and brown communities, even just some parents, in my experience working with children, which has been a while, they don't want their kid to show up. They feel like, hey, I don't know what they may say in this group over here. You know, what y'all going to be talking about? You know, are they going to be, am I going to get a report back about what's being said? And, you know, definitely in those situations, typically from a mental health perspective, a child that's a teenager does have a certain degree of privacy. Typically, I'm only going to talk to a parent if I feel like there's a safety issue, you know, going on. And I do know that some parents aren't always comfortable with their, you know, older teens and adolescents having that type of a relationship with someone outside of the family. So I can definitely see it's a barrier, but that is awesome that that is even like a possibility. I don't think we had anything like that when, did we? Okay.
I did not have that. I went to a small school in my upper years of high school, and we definitely didn't have those kinds of services.
We had clubs, but they were like, you know, Fellowship of Christian Athletes or 4-H or some, like an interest group. It wasn't something that was specifically geared around like social or emotional support or learning. So the fact that y'all even have that is that's really awesome. That's really awesome there. Do you have any sense of, let's say in a perfect scenario, if there was something mental health wise that you could have in your particular areas, because I know, again, the population served and the work you're doing is different. Is there a type of mental health resource that you wish you could have?
It would really be helpful if there was like a hired license, you know, counselor there besides the teacher, you know, someone that had more of a higher level certification that deals with more clinical type needs. Because you have all of that in a school, you know. I think that would help. And then just a good crisis management plan for different things like that. You know, we deal with you know, random shootings or, you know, things like that. And it's kind of starting to be more of like the bullying and the other things are becoming larger than what it's ever been, you know. Suicide, you know, it's a higher increased rate with that now with COVID. So I think that we just really have to not take it lightly, you know, that we have to really take it as serious as it is and get the specialized people there and actually hire them on to help in the public schools.
I agree. I think it's a great suggestion. I think even more now than ever, children are presenting with, I would say, severe, you know, mental health problems, you know, pretty severe anxiety, depression, other types of issues. So I think having that level of support, because we have an expectation for teachers to do a lot of things that is not teaching, and to recognize a lot of things that that is just not part of what your specialty and your expertise is. So I definitely think that some sense of more support would be more helpful. It may be a pipe dream, definitely in the public school systems, but it is something I feel that is needed.
Yeah, I mean, they may have some hired in the district, let's say, but then they serve multiple schools, but I think that either cluster them or just, figure out how to decrease that ratio, to of not 1 to 200, but or 1 to 6 schools, but maybe 1 to 3 schools, something like that.
That'd be great. Faye, what about you? Are there any gaps that, in a perfect case scenario, you wish that you had to support the students?
Support for the teachers. Because
okay.
Yeah, and I feel like that in particular translates and can move down to students as well. So fortunately, like I mentioned before, our system has licensed counselors, licensed clinical social workers at every campus. And some campuses that are larger, campuses on average it could be anywhere from like 300 or so students to like 1,000 students at these campuses, and we have 24, I think, schools at this point. And some of those campuses have multiple, so they might have counselors, licensed counselors, and behavior support specialists, like someone who specifically does like discussion and sort of cognitive behavioral support for students in school for those who might have like behavior issues or social anxieties and things like that. However, like we mentioned at the beginning, this year has been very telling and put a lot of things in the spotlight in terms of like what educators, teachers, campus administrators have to deal with. But those things are not new. They were exacerbated by the pandemic, but they have existed for a long time. Support for teachers, like emotional support for teachers, counseling for teachers, making that available, even if it's an outside sort of resource, is something that can help teachers and those who are working with students to refill themselves so that they can share what they have learned. An example that I can give of this: a few years back, I participated in a program that was about wellness, health and wellness for educators in particular. And in that, we did some role play. I went to like an all-day workshop one day, and we did some role play sessions on what are some of your like triggers. What are the things that make you feel stressed? What are the things that make you feel incapacitated when it comes to your job or what you're having to give out to people? How can you manage those things? What kind of script can you use for yourself? And in learning about those things, I found myself then using those with the students. Now, if it is presented to educators as like, here's another training on how to support students emotionally, then they're like, we're already maxed out on all the things that we have to get trained on, all the new technologies like we were talking about before. But things that are presented like, here, we recognize that you're a person who is in need of emotional and social emotional support. Then teaching them how to manage those things in their own lives can have such a positive effect for their performance in classroom or with students, in their personal lives at home, and then in how they can use those kind of scripts, those kinds of like, here's what skills and how to deal with stress, and teach those things that they have learned and are using themselves to students.
I think that is such a great suggestion, because I'm definitely from the school of each one. Like, you learn one, you teach one. In medical school, we have this thing: you watch a person do it, you do it, and then you teach somebody else. And that's just how the system flows. And so I definitely agree that when you have the knowledge and the information, it only makes sense that, whether it's a conversation, Jennifer, like you mentioned, with teenagers about boundaries around, internet use and what that looks like, or the potential consequences about that. Or, if I have some tools, I'm learning about how to deal with stress and anxiety. If I see someone who seems to have panic symptoms or discomfort in a social setting, I can say, hey, I learned that, I can count to 10 and do this and that. It only makes sense that it would translate. So that's really good. And I also agree with you. Whenever someone presents me with a new training and they're like, they send an email and say, you got to log on to this, I just start to glaze over. I just glaze over because it is so many of them. It's just like another thing to do. I don't even take it that, not that I don't take it that seriously, but it just seems like another thing to check off the list. So I love your idea of approaching as this is to help you, and then we just naturally, it'll kind of disseminate to the students as well.
Right. It's not that people, the educators and those administrators who are working with kids don't care about the kids. It's just that everyone's at capacity. Like we're already maxed out. And if you make me go to one more webinar.
That actually brings me to the next point, which is about, and you can either share things that you do to kind of refill yourself or just what other suggestions that you may notice. Because, sometimes we may have like mastered the art of doing something, maybe this boundary or, manage my schedule or time management, but we may see someone else who seems to be struggling. So as far as it relates to self-care and how you refill yourself from your daily work, what suggestions do you have for other teachers or things that you do yourself that you found helpful?
I think the biggest thing is knowing that you have to take one day at a time. You try to manage your time the best you can and you prioritize. But then you have to know that if it cannot be done today, it can be done tomorrow. And if you don't take care of yourself, you won't have anything to give or won't be a good teacher anyway. So it's like if you're so tired, then, what good are you to what you're trying to do? So I think that first of all, you just have to know, take it day by day. Okay. Also a schedule. Also make sure that you carve time in for you. Make sure you're on that schedule. Make sure that you're on that schedule for quiet time, meditation, prayer, whatever you do. Make sure you start your day off like that to where you take care of you. And a lot of times, even like breathing techniques or something, whenever you're about to go through a stressful day or in between meetings, going outside and getting fresh air. I think fresh air and the sun does wonders for you. Light does wonders for you. I think that we have to realize we can't be closed off in this. We have to make it work for us. How Faith was saying earlier, be flexible. You have to have a plan of flexibility. What can you do at the beginning of the day that can help your day start off better? What can you do in the middle of the day? And then there are so many things that are out of your control at this time. You don't make those decisions. So you have to say, well, what can I control? And that's how you react to them. And that's what you do with your time. So that's why I say you have to prioritize, because if it's not in the top 3 right now and you come in, this has to be done now. I will do it, but I've learned to just step back, look at my priorities, look at the deadline. I work on deadlines. I have to get a deadline. I have to say, what time frame would you like this done in? And then I space my day out to where I can achieve it. I don't like cramming something in the last minute. It's like, I'll do a little bit here, do a little bit here. And then if I'm neglecting myself or my family, I'm not going to be any good to my job either, because I'm going to have guilt, right? So
Right.
I think that you have to make sure that you plan intentionally, spend time with your children, spend time with your husband, spend time by yourself, and then make sure, most work days are 8 to 5, cancel that at 5. Don't you're not impressing anybody by staying till 6:30 and doing sloppy work. And let's say that you don't do sloppy work. Let's say you do good work, but you're not impressing somebody back at home that's been waiting for you since 5. So why do that? I'm serious. That's a soapbox. I want to keep talking,
Well, no, you dropped like a lot of gems, not just, boundaries with your work day, making time for yourself. But let me ask you, and Faith, you can answer this too when you start to talk. But when I give this suggestion, particularly to moms, they say even just carving out that time, like you said, Jennifer, for prayer, meditation, or to get out, they feel guilty about that. They feel like they cannot even take that small amount of time to themselves. So What would you say to that? I guess that's a more general conversation, because when I'm giving, they're like, Doc, you don't understand. When I get off of work, I have to immediately start doing this because my kids haven't seen me all day. So there's still an element of guilt, even just taking 10 or 15 minutes. So what would you say to a person like that?
Well, not my parents, my child, that's funny, actually told me, have you had time to yourself? I shouldn't even say
Oh, okay.
this. My middle child, she'll say,
Like,
Mom,
mommy needs some time to herself.
have you had some time to yourself yet? Because when we were doing the whole rush, when I picked them up, I would say, Mama just needs like 10, 15 minutes of no talking or no asking, can I? So now she knows I need that time. And if I'm like, close the door, turn off the light. What did you do? Turn this in. Why is your work not done yet? Your work should be done 11:59. You better turn it by 11:59. And that's what most platforms like, by midnight it better be turned in. And she's like, Mommy, did you have some me time yet? So I realize it, and she appreciates that. So most mothers need to realize their kids can sense when you're a little on edge. You need to let work be work. Now, I do know that, we are sometimes in need of answering an email after hours, or it's a deadline, but I think that you just have to know when to shut it off. And I've learned that through COVID since we've been back to work. Now, when it was working around the clock, that was very, very hard.
But I like it that you're also showing her, you're actually being an example. You're showing her that, hey, it's okay to take that 10 or 15 minutes. The kids actually learn that, mom has some needs outside of them. You're actually showing them, like, and even if it's just 10 to 15 minutes, then my mom has some needs that she has to do outside. And it's okay for them to, it's okay if you need to go to your room for 10 to 15 minutes. Maybe you need, a little on edge. That's okay too. So I think it really is modeling that in a healthy way.
Yeah, I will also say that to moms, you have to realize that your kids are human and they have to learn skills, and you have to prepare them to be adults. So I can't be that type of mom that acts like I'm Miss Superwoman and a kid can't fix a sandwich for themselves. Or I will just be putting more on myself and then doing them a disservice. So I think that we have to also know that the responsibilities that your child can handle, go ahead and give it to them. I mean, that's just building their capacity, and that's building them up to be a successful adult. And that's what I've learned too. Don't take it all on myself. I'm not the only one that knows how to make a sandwich or pour cereal and milk. So.
All right, Faith, what about you? I love that though. Yes.
I agree that modeling the kind of good, healthy self-care behavior for your family is going to be a benefit both to you and to them. They'll learn how they can do that for themselves by watching you. But a couple of things that I've been trying to do more of to maintain some sense of balance is reminding myself that I have to ration my emotional labor, because that is an entire thing besides whatever the job is itself. In the times where we've got racial injustice, where we have like all of these political issues and economic issues in the news as adults that are like, that's weighing on us, the financial repercussions of what has happened in the pandemic is affecting people in different ways. There's that, and there's like the feeling of disconnection that you might have from not getting to see your family and friends yourself and get that support, like that social support that means a lot to you, means that there's added emotional pressure. But what we can do is ration what we're going to devote our emotional energy to. Sometimes I have to give myself breaks from like paying it. Like I have not been, since the trial results, I guess, was that a week ago or so? I have not watched the news or any news for a week, because I had to recognize that my capacity to take in, as an empath, I'm taking in a lot. My capacity, I was like, I'm at capacity. I can't add more, or something else is going to lose. I won't be able to balance it. So where you can, you're going to have to cut, certain things off. And that might take a change of mindset about how much of the world or your world that you're in control of. That might mean that if you are usually the one that does the laundry or does the grocery shopping, that you have to communicate. Either if you have a partner that you can communicate with it, hey, I need you to take this part on because I can't juggle this whole thing right now. Or you might have to outsource it if you have the finances to do that, the ability to do that. Or you might have to decide, well, the laundry just not going to get done this week. You're going to have to decide those things for yourselves, because if we allow ourselves to, we can take on the whole burden of everything all the time and be carrying it. And that doesn't do anybody service. I would rather take a few things off of my plate that I can take off, even if it feels like this is not a thing I can take off. Like, I have to take care of this thing. Well, what are the things that if the house is going to fall apart if I don't take care of it, versus, this is something that I can put on pause for a while. I would rather take a few things off of my plate than and so that I can hold it, than be trying to balance it and everything is falling off.
And that is a true gem. And one of my coworkers had a way of kind of addressing the emotional energy, because I think when you're in a caring or helping profession like we are, there's going to be some emotional energy that it takes to do that work. And, he basically told me in the morning he wakes up and, on his way to work, he kind of checks in and he really says, like, what percent am I at basically of my emotional energy? Am I at 100? I'm 8. Because sometimes you wake up, you ain't starting at 100. You might be starting at 85 or 75. And then, when I leave work, right, I still have to go home, fill in the blank, cook dinner, take care of my children, whatever I need to do. So I need to at least leave here with like 20% or whatever you feel like it is for you, and say, okay, some days for me, I'm saying these patients going to get like 25%, because, meaning, if somebody having a bad day, some days I may be more empathetic. I may be like, okay, we're going to be done. We'll see each other in 3 months. It's like, I know I'm going to not have the same amount of energy to engage or have empathy. And that's just to be honest, I did not get sleep last night. So I am not starting at 100%. And I know I need to leave here. I have these other tasks. So we're going to get this. This is all we're going to get today. And tomorrow we're going to start over and hope for a better day. So I love that, Jim, that we have to have enough. We cannot be working on empty emotionally.
Right. I really like that you were talking about the percentages where you are and what you're able to devote to things, because if we can think of what we are putting out into our work life, family lives, our lives, then in that kind of way, we can understand that we can't function no one can at 100% every day.
No.
Like, you can't be, especially in times like we're in now, where there's still uncertainty. We're in this sort of limbo situation where, like, well, some things seem to be getting back to normal, but some things we're not even sure what things are permanently changed yet. Right. So there's not a clear normal to even get back to at this point. So you have to give yourself permission to give less so that you can recover. We're still much affected, but this has been a traumatic experience for people to varying degrees. Exactly. But nobody I know has gone unaffected. So we have to do less. And somebody made this I'm sure it was a meme or whatever that said it a lot more eloquently, but it was making this like a Star Trek reference about warp drive. Okay. And how you cannot go, like the Enterprise could not function or fly at warp drive all the time, like at warp 9, like all the time. Because if they do that, the ship would explode.
Right.
So you can't. Shaking. Yeah, lights blaring, there's going to be problems. Somebody's going to have to go down in engineering and fix something, Yeah. So I'm using this Star Trek because I know you know about Star Trek, Dr. Dooley.
Yes.
But that we can't do that. You have to function at less than that. So if warp 9 is your 100%, and you put yourself in that mind, like, oh, if that is expectation. I can't be at 100% every day, and I don't have to be.
Right.
I don't have to be. Your baseline has to be significantly lower than your max capacity. So if you're functioning at your baseline, you're doing fine.
Exactly.
And then when you have a little bit more capacity, you do more.
Right.
So we got to bring it down.
I love that. I love that.
We need to make that into a chart.
Yes.
Right.
A reminder that we post every Monday. Your baseline, your capacity.
Right. It's a beautiful way to try to visualize it, because it really is the fact that we just cannot function that way and be emotionally healthy and balanced. So, well, thank you, ladies, both right there. I mean, just the whole presentation, but definitely right there. And there are just so many great gems, and I really do hope that people take the time to really listen to this live stream. We need to hear the voices of people who are on the front lines in education, and I really do believe that people on the front lines should have a significant contribution to what is happening, to the decisions that are being made. And oftentimes that is just not what happens. So I definitely will include in the show notes. I know both of you sent me some resources and for people, very patients of mine, for people and for students and for parents. So I'll definitely include that in the show notes, and I have some other crisis information. So I'll also include that in the show notes. But again, thank you, ladies, for being here. It's a really great live stream, and I look forward to talking to you all next time.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.